Welcome to Alpine Daily for Tuesday. We've been looking at the book of Hebrews each week, looking at some of the key verses in each chapter, and today we're in chapter 3. The theme of chapter 3 is to establish that Jesus is greater than Moses. If you remember, we said earlier that really the whole idea of the book of Hebrews is to establish the greatness of Jesus. And the people that were receiving this letter were being tempted to go back to their old ways of Judaism. They're tempted to relegate Jesus to just another prophet or just another element of the Old Testament system. And so, point by point, the author of Hebrews is going through all of this list of important things in Judaism to establish that Jesus is greater. And in this case, he's greater than Moses. Now, Moses was the prophet that led Israel out of Egypt. He wrote 5 books of the Old Testament. And so they revered him tremendously. And so it was really important to establish the supremacy of Jesus. And in doing that, he begins thinking about the role of the people under Moses' ministry, and is reminded about how Jesus rebelled against God under Moses in the wilderness. That's described in the book of Numbers, and how the people really got mad at God and wanted to go back to Egypt and grumbled and complained about what was happening and rebelled against Moses even. And as he's thinking about that, he quotes in the Old Testament passage that describes that hard-heartedness. And thinking about Jesus being greater than Moses, then he begins to think about what are the implications of that for us. If we're going to follow Christ, he says to us, "See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." If we're going to follow Christ in a better way that the Old Testament believers followed Moses, this is what it's going to take. And so he wants us to understand, first of all, that sin is deceptive. He talks here about the deceitfulness of sin. Sin always promises things that it can't deliver. It seems like it's going to be okay, but later on we find out that there are consequences. Those things seem to be hidden to our hearts when we consider sin. So sin is deceptive, and when we fall to it, then our hearts begin to become hardened. It becomes easier and easier each time to stumble and fall into that sin. And we start to lose track of what's real and what's important in our lives. The next thing he says is that we need each other to stay faithful. He says, encourage one another daily, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We need to be together with other believers. We need what each other has to say. I need people to come to me and tell me if I'm blowing it, or if I'm starting to slip into hard-heartedness in some area of my life. And so then the final idea that I want you to consider today is that each one of us needs to be willing to be that kind of a friend. To be the friend who can go to somebody who's willing to tell them the truth. If I want somebody to tell me the truth so that my relationship with Christ will be better, then I should be the person also who's willing to tell somebody else the truth, of course lovingly, gently, so that they can be walking closer to Christ and have a better relationship with Him in their life. So be thinking about that a little bit now. Pray for God to reveal to you any area of hard-heartedness or deception of sin that's working in your life, because a lot of times we won't know it unless the Holy Spirit reveals it or unless someone else tells it. And if you have a friend who might be drifting away from God today, be sure to pray for that person. So thanks for tuning in today. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.